In the 198th BlockTalks, we speak with Megan Knab, CEO of Franklin Payroll, who talks about ways for DeFi to solve TradFi challenges. I'm your host, Mauricio Magaldi, and this is Blockdrops, your weekly digest on blockchain for business. These news are not a form of endorsement, sponsorship, or encouragement for consumption, and are meant for educational purposes only. All right, everybody. I'm here with Megan Knab, who's going to tell us who she is and what she does with blockchain. Megan, welcome to BlockTalks.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get started from the origin story. How did you end up in crypto?
Yeah, I think I always kind of, when I answer this question, like pick one of the different paths because there's so many, like there were a confluence of events that really led me into the crypto space. But a couple things. So I learned about Ethereum while I was going to business school at night part-time. So working on Wall Street during the day, going to business school at night. A lot of New Yorkers do that same kind of vibe. Heard about Ethereum in an accounting class, actually, and was just very interested in the technology. During my day job, I was working as a staff accountant at a Wall Street firm and had actually sort of uncovered this very large, like multi-million-dollar accounting fraud happening at the company, and was very frustrated by how that whole situation happened, how it manifested itself, and then how it was handled after. And so, both of these things kind of happening at the same time, I had this, moment of like, Ethereum is the thing that is going to solve corporate greed in the world. And I, quit my job and bought a ticket to go to DevCon, actually. And so that's kind of the original origin story. I happened to be living in Bushwick, Brooklyn at that time as well. And that was the sort of birthplace of consensus. Ended up meeting some people who were in the consensus orbit. So very much like right place, right time, got a job working at consensus. So that's how I dove in initially. And a lot has happened since then.
At that moment, I understand the whole fraud thing is like very compelling. What are the other things that attracted you to Ethereum and crypto in general? Landing a job at that stage at consensus, like super early on, was something like it's like the holy grail of any potential upside. So I bet there's a lot of attraction points from that era. Can you kind of outline and maybe give us a little bit of color? What were they and why they were so compelling?
Yeah, I think there's some like disconnect. I think that sometimes happens with like young idealistic people when they get out of college and start working at like their first corporate job, which was certainly something that happened to me where, I really enjoyed college and like the intellectual pursuits and then sort of fell into a humdrum kind of career that I was not super happy with. Um, there was like an allure that was a lot of vibes based for consensus back in the 2016-17 era. I've told this story like once or twice before, but I used to spend my weekends doing my business school homework at a cafe in Bushwick. And some guy there that, was chatting me up or whatever was like, hey, there's a cryptocurrency startup in the back of this cafe. And that was the consensus office. And I was like, this is very cool. Like, this is something I want to be involved with, like working in the back of a cafe. But, that was like a fun hook. And I was kind of bought into the idea already. But I think like, this idea that like I'm working at this, big firm, they're making a ton of money, but like how they were operating the business was so antiquated, and so manual and so like reliant on people. There's this like one like incident that happened that stands out in my mind where um, during Hurricane Sandy in New York, all of the like subways got knocked out. At that time, I was living in Jamaica, Queens, really far away from my job in the financial district. And I ended up having to walk from Jamaica, Queens to the financial district. It was like a mix of taking the bus and walking right after this hurricane, swept through, along with a couple of other people from the accounting department because we had to run payroll. And the only way we could do it was to get onto the local computer where we were running ADP so that, all these, 1,000 people or whatever at the firm could get paid on time. And, it's just a function of that. There are a lot of back offices that still operate with, these local mainframes that, there's not a lot of redundancy, there's not a lot of efficiency. And so, yeah, getting involved in the Ethereum space was something where I was like, this is going to be a step function improvement in everything and how businesses operate. And it's obviously taken taking a lot of time to kind of develop, but that was the motivation then, and it's really still the motivation for me now. Almost 10 years later.
I love that the trauma, or the better than the trauma, I think the restlessness to fix something brought you to Franklin. So what's the journey like? Because you're doing payroll and a freaking mainframe somewhere, and now you're solving payroll for an entire vertical out of the blockchain. So is this the big arc, like the big Megan arc that culminated with Franklin? What else contributed to that?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at my career and as a hero's journey, like Franklin is this turning point, I think, hopefully at least. But yeah, started up Franklin about 3 years ago, where did a lot of different things after my time at Consensus. Ended up running finance at a consulting firm called Serotonin, which is a Web3 marketing studio, and also like they have a product studio as well. Um, and so we were taking in revenue and sending out payments in like everything you could think of. We had fiat, we had crypto, we were operating on a lot of chains. And then there really were very few tools other than like a Gnosis safe for us to be able to manage our crypto, in a reasonable way, that you would expect from any kind of like, back office. It was very hard to have controls where, there's not a single point of failure for like somebody managing all of the wallets and things like that. Um, so really, I spent a lot of time like talking to different startups that were kind of like building in the space, and thought that there was really like a lot of stuff missing for like if you really want to operate your business on chain. Like there's a lot of context that you need from like the traditional world, to be able to like operate in a tax compliant way, in a like generally compliant way, and to make sure that you're paying people on time, all of that kind of stuff. So the thesis behind Franklin was really like, how do we just start moving more of our operations on chain? And can we do that in a hybrid manner where, okay, we have our kind of like legacy banking payment stack, we have our crypto stack, like, can we have them talk to each other more cohesively? And that was something that, really the needs of the business dictated. So prototype Franklin within Serotonin, it worked great. And before I knew it, we were like raising a round of funding, spinning it out, and here we are.
And in terms of the onboarding, because usually these kind of B2B tools, and I work in banking, I did systems, I did data, I did transformation and whatnot. There's always like it's B2B cycles are gigantic. So the sales cycle takes forever. There are a multitude of decision makers. Everybody has to sign off. Somebody changes, it, you go all the way back to square one. Once you're past that hurdle, then you have to implement and integrate and configure, and things are going to break, and your CTO is going to yell at you and all that stuff, and the CFO is frustrated and all that. So you're operating B2B in crypto. Um, can you compare and contrast what life's like for B2B in crypto versus B2B in traditional businesses as you land on a corporate type system?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, very familiar with this kind of like differential. Also had a life working in B2B equities brokerage back in the day. So um, it's interesting. I think that like there are a couple things that really surprised me when I was starting Franklin. Um, One of which was I had this thought, that there were a lot of crypto companies that really wanted to be operating more on chain, and they were just sort of waiting for this tool to help them streamline a lot of manual processes. And that actually was really not the case. A lot of the initial kind of like prospective customers that I talked to were all using Web2 tools. And I was very surprised by that. And so I found myself actually kind of not selling our product as much as like this idea like, operating on chain is actually a lot more efficient. And if you already have some of these assets on your balance sheet, like let's put them to work. Um, so that's what I would say there. Um, I think there's some level, we're our initial go to market strategy was like, let's be the first payroll company that companies choose to onboard because you don't have to go through a migration process. We didn't really have the in-house like knowledge of how to do that yet. We definitely do now, and we work with bigger companies now than we were 3 years ago. But being the first one was sort of our strategy to get us like bootstrapped off the ground with our initial set of customers. The great thing about operating in the Web3 space is like there are new companies popping up every day. So like having a robust startup environment was helpful for us there. I think that there's something, at least when we think about payroll specifically in the United States, which is our primary market, it is so tied to so many other things outside of just running payroll. It's tied to your health insurance, it's tied to your retirement programs. And so, almost like the cycles for those things that are just connected to the paycheck are more important for our sales cycle and timing than, saying, hey, it's the end of the quarter, like, let's just upgrade your software.
Well, that's an interesting strategy at the beginning. Like you don't have a competitor or you don't have a big hurdle to come into a client and be the first thing that solves the problem. You shorten that path and you actually solve for them. Pretty clever. Now, I do want to know how this evolved over time because you mentioned bigger clients, probably more sophisticated, more complicated. How that evolved, both in the sense of go to market and actually getting that to work with this kind of new contingent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like we got a lot smarter as time went on about all of our competitors and their strengths and weaknesses, and we are, very strategically, surgically, right, hitting them where it hurts and and trying to be as effective as we can, and also just incentivize people to really make the switch. I think that accountants and CFOs, controllers, like our kind of target market, um, buyer persona can be a little persnickety. They're not always the most open to changing something. Like once you have a system that works well, like why change it? Um, so I think I think to be honest, there are so many of these crypto payment startups that have come to market in the last couple of years that have been started up by developers who are passionate about blockchain technology and digital assets and whatever, and like that's great. I think that one of the special sauces for us being able to be successful in getting market share is that I'm an accountant by trade, so being able to speak some of that language, I think was also helpful, like as part of our sales cycle. Yeah, I think like when we look to at our competitors, like it's a really tight market. So there's a lot of price compression for payroll companies usually charge on a per head basis. So however many employees you have, they charge you for based on that amount. That price point is coming down so low. It's almost like TradFi payroll companies are not really making money off of their core services anymore. They're making money off of like getting a kickback from health insurance vendors or revenue share with 401k programs, things like that. Um, that's not really the business model that we want to be competing on. We want to be making money as a company, but we also, don't want to get into this rat race of just like a race to zero and whoever can get the biggest market share like hurts the least. So something that we have, thought about a lot from the very beginning is why is it so expensive for these payroll companies like TradFi companies to actually operate? And there are a couple of reasons. One is the payroll tech stack is pretty much the same at every payroll company you go to. There are like two payroll calculators in the United States that hold the whole tax code, and they are very expensive to use. They are really antiquated. It's like stepping back into the 1990s, like inside a mainframe or something. And so for us, thinking about like how do we actually rebuild that from the ground up in a way that's like a lot cheaper to use, that is more accurate, we get more updates, faster updates than the legacy guys. You know, we're able to bring our operating cost for like this kind of like tax technology from, you know, 50 grand, whatever, 60 grand per year down to like basically, you know, less than $1,000. And we're able to do that by via like fine tuning some LLM models. And I think philosophically, we should just open source it, and we probably will open source it someday, because it's like, why is our, you know, the tax code should be open source, why is it so hard to find out? Like, let's just put it out there for the public to use. um, that's one example. There are a lot of other examples, but that's sort of like how we're also trying to flip the script a little bit on like entering into this like much broader industry, not just being about crypto, but being about like, yeah, payroll and payments in the US.
I like that you touched on the AI, because one of the things I've been doing a lot of research on is that intersection. And I know that there are very a variety of types of intersections between AI and blockchain, or any other technology. What is the specifics use you're bringing AI to within the product, or to build the product, or to sell the where is AI playing a part in your business
Yeah,
as you scale?
yeah, I always get like a little uncomfortable answering this question, just because I feel like our identity as a startup is like, I would never go around and say we're an AI startup, you know? But I think that, you know, we're a crypto startup, but more and more, I think we'll see like a convergence there for sure. And the reality is like we do leverage like the latest technology to build the best product, and like AI is part of that. So we've used it like largely internally, like this tax calculator project that I mentioned. It's worked great. I think like a lot of other like startups out there, our like development team uses a lot of these kinds of tools to produce a lot of code. Like, you know, we started in 2022, right when ChatGPT was released. And like, if we looked at the amount of code that our team was shipping then versus now, it's like, you know, order of magnitude, quite a bit more. Um, so I think that's kind of our approach right now. But if I were to think about like in 5 years, what would we need to be doing? Like how would like what we do intersect with AI more directly on like the corporate side or at the employee side? Like, you know, crypto is a programmable money. AI is a like very smart program, and so it feels like crypto is going to be like the currency of AI tools. And so, you know, this idea of like having agentic payment agents and things like that, like, um, is stuff that we are thinking about quite a bit. It does feel like that's where the future is going. A smart contract is like the perfect way to completely automate a payroll run in a lot of instances. And if you can automate more of those like inputs and outputs via LLMs or other types of agents, like, you know, we'll be there.
Payroll is to pay something, not people. They maybe need to pay agents to do the stuff you need them to do. It's going to be interesting to see. I like that vision. In that capacity, as you build and you roll out, what are the types of startups that have been more interested in, other than the crypto ones? Probably those are kind of core use case. But the buyer persona, or the persona you're trying to solve for, can be so much wider. Have you onboarded companies into crypto through payroll? What was that like?
I love this question because it was, yeah, big surprises. Any founder, startup journey, whatever, there are things that you don't expect. One was crypto companies not using crypto. That surprised me. I think there are more of them doing it. The other thing that surprised me, yeah, was we ended up getting picked up. I don't. We put out some paid ads like a while ago. So some of these like kind of more like traditional type businesses ended up hitting us up, and we it took us a little time to figure out how to onboard them. But basically, there are lots of different kinds of companies that really struggle with payroll because of like compressed cash flow cycles. So one example of this would be a nursing staffing company. They take revenue in, they get paid via like a paper check from the hospital once a month. They obviously have to be able to pay out their nursing staff that are out working at the hospital. If the check doesn't arrive, if somebody can't go pick it up, like there's very little time for them to be able to deposit it, have it settle, and then be able to send out payments on time. So, we have like a construction staffing company, really like a construction company. They just have a bunch of different kinds of workers. They wanted to be able to pay out their workforce like same day. If you go to a TradFi payroll company, to onboard into like a same day payroll payment system, it is really really expensive. And basically, what you're doing is setting up a very complex loan agreement between your company and the payroll processor, or your workers and the payroll processor. And it really is kind of like this modern payday lending. Like earned wage access programs are just like the worst thing I think that have been payday lending rebranded. That's what I think. And so with stablecoins, we there are so many obvious benefits around these solving these kinds of problems. You can settle much faster. The cost to actually transact is a lot cheaper. And actually, at Franklin, what we do right now is like we do subsidize gas for our users just because we want them to have a better user experience. And these kinds of like more traditional businesses really don't have to touch crypto. We just kind of like formalize this announcement of a product that we have that we're calling bankless payroll. So a company can fund in stable coins and have it be paid out totally in USD. They never have to have a bank account. The opposite can work as well, where you can fund payroll from a bank, and we can use stable coins under the hood actually to do these settlements. So, did we onboard companies into crypto? Like, they don't really ever have to touch it. But we can give them the kind of like benefits of at least stable coins from under the hood.
I love that. There's a meme that I really like. The Homer Simpson just backing into a bush.
Yeah.
This is what you guys are doing. Like you're abstracting away. They don't even know they're in crypto. Like they don't have to because it's the infrastructure. God damn it! Right? And I love that vision because
Yeah.
I really like that that I do what I do. That I work in Web3 and I've been in blockchain for 11 years. Blah 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 blah. But I would love for a day to not talk about blockchain because that's just what we do.
Yeah.
And maybe I won't see this, maybe you won't see this, but hopefully that will be true sometime. And then every time someone gives me an example like you abstracting away that the infrastructure just for better overall problem solving is something that is like, okay, we're in the right track.
A lot of people say this, but it is very early days. Like, to have companies that heard that a stable coin exists and maybe it could make things better, and then they somehow found us. Like, that's certainly not the norm. But I think we're like getting there. It'll just take a little. I think it takes more time for us, like just building brand awareness, making sure that people know we solve these problems in the first place, and we're not just some weird crypto people sitting in the corner of the industry. Like, that's the struggle, but it's a fun one.
It is, it is. It's God's work. I like that. Um, in the sense that you're building B2B infrastructure essentially. Um, what are the like we covered a few of the challenges. What are the ones that were like you were like, oh, this is gonna wear me out? Like what were the ones that were really big challenges and how did you overcome them? Because building in the intersection of these two industries is like building in one industry is hard enough. Building in the other is hard enough. Building intersection is probably more than twice as difficult. So what were those?
Yeah, yeah. I think one thing that we spend a lot of time trying to perfect is our user experience, because our users like may not be super crypto native. They may not be as comfortable using a wallet or signing transactions, things like that. So figuring out how do we just make it seem like a familiar kind of UX with a legacy payroll system while giving them the power of crypto has been something that we have spent a lot of time thinking about. And one of the things that's tough with crypto in general is that although the money moves faster than it does through a banking system, it feels slower. Like if you swipe your card, right, like a credit card or whatever, there is like a massive process that goes on in the back to settle those transactions. And with a stable coin, or you kind of have to wait for the transaction to be minted on chain, and that can take a couple of seconds. And so you can't kind of like rapid fire like send a bunch of transactions, one right after another. So we've tried a bunch of different things. Like part of it is like as an app developer, we are a little bit at the mercy of like just where the infrastructure is at a given time. So we have done like a lot of batch processing as an example. So we can put together as many transactions as you can tee up at one time and then send them all at once. And that kind of gives a little bit of a better user experience. Like, I don't think we're totally there yet. Um, that's one thing. I think another thing that is like this really like question for the soul of our industry is an issue around private transactions. So operating on chain is like a very public thing. It's very easy to track funds. Payroll is a sensitive industry. You can see how much your coworkers are making on chain. Like that is something that our users kind of have to just be okay with for now, but it is certainly not going to be acceptable long term, bringing to large enterprises, things like that. There are ways you can basically obfuscate or make it very hard to tell how transactions are flowing, but we really need like native layer one private transactions to like get this thing to scale. I think there's also some level of that kind of concerns me just personally as a you know global citizen and a user of blockchains, is like they can be a great tool for power, and as we see more pick up certainly in the United States around stablecoin legislation, as we see banks getting into issuing their own stablecoins and like much more of like institutional adoption at like the native layer. The fact that we don't really have like wide scale privacy tools yet is just so nerve wracking, so that's kind of, I feel like, the thing that we don't always say out loud, that's worth like banging the drum on to say like we really need to figure this out. Like how can we incorporate this into our tech stack? It's not clear to me, but I think we are getting extremely close, and I know that this is like an area of expertise for you.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to, toot my own horn, but being a former banking chief data officer and being a crypto degen at the same time, sometimes it really bugs my brain that this is where we are as an industry. So yeah, therefore, doing what I do in my day job kind of landed really naturally in my mind, and I'm happy that this is it's not a siloed conversation. There's like a super wide range of conversations we've seen, um, other than obviously Charles Hoskinson doing this for the last 6 7 years, but even Vitalik has raised that recently. We're seeing the guys at Base bringing in Horizon as the privacy layer. So there are fronts in the industry, and from my earlier enterprise blockchain days, that part was the part that was a major deterrent to enterprises to actually go on chain, even in the permission world of blockchains, which, well, if the other participant also sees my data, then I don't want to participate. And that was on the private permission side, let alone the public side. So I think we're gonna get there. I think there are different views on how to solve for that problem, but absolutely something that that speaks. And I'm glad that this is something that you're realizing as you build in the industry and you're onboarding non-crypto natives into the industry, because yes, I mean, I think there is an uptake on kidnapping French crypto people in the last like month and a half, and I was like, I was in France. I'm like, I'm glad I'm not, famous, because this can be problematic, especially if you're like a Bitcoin wealthy guy. I mean, it's going to be attractive.
It's a must. We have to build it into the app layer. But there is like this broader conversation, I think, happening as well, particularly around this Coinbase hack, where all this customer data, is God knows where. Like it can be very dangerous for people, and who knows the ramifications of like that situation. And we can talk about it at least from like a policy perspective. Like, do we have to have this like 100% opt-in KYC process in the banking or like asset system, or should we just have an opt-out system for whatever trips a risk flag or something like that? And that can also help with inclusivity into the financial system. But we are trying to protect against like relatively few bad actors, and it costs all of the good actors all of their personal data. Like, so I think that there's a lot to think about there. I think that like the solution is really people managing, being able to like never have to interact with these centralized counterparties, right? And being able to run everything like DeFi, degen without like the problems of, managing your private keys and things like that. And there are so many things happening, across ecosystems to get to that point. So that would be the dream.
And the good thing is that we are in an industry that is open source, that is science driven, science based, experimental as well. So we're going to see lots of things popping up simultaneously with different takes to solve the same problem in different ways. And at some point, it converges or blends or gets together and really elevates, the rest of the industry just by being innovative in that particular direction, solving a problem that is known and horizontal to everybody. So I'm with you there, I'm glad that we get to contribute to that discussion as well. This is important. In your day to day as a crypto entrepreneur, how do you keep yourself healthy and sane? I'm assuming here, so just bear with me. But do you have a routine, a habit? Have you incorporated something recently that really brought you to the next level? What's your recipe to, because we can't operate 24/7. We're human. We're not, you know, AI agents yet.
That's a good question. Like, to be honest, I don't know that I have cracked the code. I think I am still figuring that out. I think like I got a dog when I first started up my company because I was like, all right, I got to put down some roots. Like, I would travel a lot and things like that. And so, you know, it sounds so dumb, but like walking the dog, hanging out at the dog park, like, um, that's like really maybe the number one thing I do. But yeah, I think like I'm not really feeling like stressed or depressed or whatever around like the entrepreneur's journey yet. I'm like living on a high, honestly, that I get to like work with a lot of great entrepreneurs themselves, as either as customers or as like vendors or just like people like in the social sphere, right? That gives me a lot of energy. Um, yeah, that's what I would say. I like to cook. I'm just trying to learn how to cook better, so that's kind of like a fun pursuit. So yeah.
Food's always good. Yeah, funny you say this because I was chatting today with a good friend of mine who was the very first guest on the show on the Block Talks, Nathan Gower, and we were talking about. I was like, very fortunate that I'm in the position I'm in, or I do what I do, and this is like it's like trying to build the internet like 20, 30 years ago. It's like it's the same feeling. And he was like, yeah, man, gratitude is the best form of satisfaction. And that kind of stuck to me. Like, yes, that's it. You just said it. Like, we get to do this. Like, that's a privilege. We don't like. I never take this for granted.
Yeah, I think Serena Williams said something like that, like pressure is a privilege. And so that's like definitely what I feel as well. So, but I think like that being said, like, you're running a company, you never get a vacation, you have to be accountable to everyone. I was telling a friend recently, it's not like I have no boss. It's like I have a zillion bosses now, like
Everyone
every
is my
customer,
boss.
every investor, which, it's not like I'm out here doing whatever I want kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that it is important to maintain a healthy lifestyle, and that's like constant journey for me. But so far, I'm feeling good.
In industry wise, as we kind of try and legitimize, I think that's the word I'm looking for. Legitimize the industry. How do we prevent ourselves from working the next 20 years in the industry and turning back and realizing we didn't fix that one thing and now we are kind of back at the same place? What's the one thing and why is it?
Yeah, I will. reject the premise of the question respectfully and say, like, why do we need to try and create legitimacy for this industry? Like, it is inherently legitimate. And I said this recently to the Defiant, I think, where, all these big fintech companies coming in to play in the stablecoin space, at least like PayPal, like Stripe, like whoever else, like they need stablecoins to stay relevant. Like they need this technology to be competitive. Like they are going to get completely obliterated by, the Franklins and whatever other payment startups of the world if they don't like catch up very quick. So that's kind of my feeling. Like this idea that like, you know, it's like such a big vote of confidence for Stripe to buy Bridge. It's like, no, like that's they have to, like they have to get serious about this technology. And so it's kind of like we've been here, we've been waiting for you. Like nice that you're showing up a bit late to the party and everything. So that's what I think a little bit around the topic of legitimacy. That being said, like crypto as an industry has suffered so much because of like a couple of just very bad actors, like the SBFs, the Sun Tzus of the world. And that to me is a function of like a very ineffective regulatory structure. The idea that like, the SEC is out here like putting out stupid like letters to companies that, whatever. The SEC has the right to ask any questions of any company operating in the asset space that they want. But like, how did FTX go under under the radar? Like when I was working in equities brokerage, I spoke with FTX a lot. I spoke with SBF a lot about like how they manage their accounts and things like that. And it was very easy to discount them because being a full, working at a licensed carrying broker, the fact that they weren't separately managing user accounts, like that's illegal, And they like, how did that? I was nobody. I was like some, analyst, right, trying to stand up a crypto trading desk. Like, how did a regulator not get into this sooner, especially when they had so many assets under management? Like, I think like it's more like the regulators have like really messed up, and they should very seriously take a look at what they've been doing, and make sure that like that's prevented in the future. So I think crypto does a good job at calling out bullshit, and like the structures that we operate in are not very good at holding them accountable.
I like that take. I think my angle on legitimacy is not to be accepted by the legacy, is just being predominantly necessary. And you went straight there. That's where you went. That's cool. Um, in that capacity that you were in traditional finance or work in traditional industries and you moved into crypto about 10 years ago, when the people from your past reach out to you and say, Megan, I love what you're doing, I want to do it as well, how do you onboard them? What's your usual take on, like, do you tell them go buy, ETH at Coinbase, or is there like, go read this, go listen to Blockdrops podcast? What's the take there?
I think like there is some personal gratification that I know a lot of people working in this industry feel, where like I was just the weirdo for so long, working in crypto. It didn't seem like a real job or anything. And now it's like kind of cool, whatever. Or maybe it's not cool. I don't know. But at least people don't look at you quite as like you're nuts anymore. Um, one of the great onboarding experiences I feel like of my life for my Web 2 friends, for lack of a better term, was actually Constitution DAO. And some of that was actually just because we were, I was living here in New York, and was actually doing some consulting work for Sotheby's at the time. And when Constitution DAO took off, my, just normal friends were like, how do we get involved in buying the Constitution? And so, setting up, helping them set up a wallet and like, onboarding like into Juicebox, into the DAO. And then having, tuning in to the auction to like see would we win it or not. It was such a really cool cultural moment. And then afterwards too, like people tokens, which were the tokens that got issued by the DAO, they shot up in price, and then a bunch of my friends made money from it. Like, it was a really great experience. So that was like, if we like a moment, like I think that that was actually brilliant, brilliant kind of moment. But in general, I think actually more and more of like my like social sphere is actually savvy to crypto. Like people, you know, have bought Bitcoin in the past from, or have like an old Coinbase or Gemini account that have been sitting around for a while. Um, and if anybody ever asks me to, you know, I will always say you should only invest whatever you can afford to lose. And like, that's it. Like, I never want to give somebody some advice that like, you know, they end up losing money from. Um, that's kind of what I do. The other thing I do, actually, which is recent, I'm in my early 30s. A lot of my friends are having kids now. Like, I always give Bitcoin gifts for kids' birthdays. And like, I think that that's kind of fun. And it's like an exciting way for them to also kind of interact with crypto as well. So those are kind of the strategies that I have. But I should recommend the Block Drops podcast as well. And I'll do that going forward.
Especially if they want to learn blockchain in Portuguese. I'll do that. Listen, we're about our time, and I really want to thank you for taking the time. We haven't spoken in like a couple of years. I think it was the Blockchain Insider. You had just launched, frankly, I think, or barely. So it's great for me to check back with you and see how far you've come and how you're doing. So thanks for taking the time and the chance to meet twice in sharing your stuff. So thank you. And how can people keep tracks of what you're doing, what Franklin is doing, and learn more about the stuff you guys are building?
Yeah, totally. So you can follow us on Twitter at Franklin Payroll, or check out our website, hellofranklin.co.
Megan, thank you again. And I hope to see you at some point in real life in a crypto conference somewhere.
That would be great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Catch us online. We're on Instagram at BlockDropsPodcast, on Twitter at BlockDropsPod or 0x Mauricio. We're on Lens at blockdrops.lens. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn. Write to us at blockdropspodcast@gmail.com, and you can listen to the Blockdrops podcast at Spotify, iColab, Faberbun Tech, and all of the other major streaming platforms. Yay! Shout out to Megan for such an incredible journey from TradFi to DeFi and beyond, and to Lauren Bukowski for making this conversation possible. Don't forget to leave the ratings on your favorite player and check out the merch store at blockdropspodcast.xyz. This is all for today. Stay rare, stay weird, LFJ.